What's up, Jitterinos, and welcome back to the Game Addicts podcast. I'm your player one, Brando, and today we are going to be taking a deep dive into Resident Evil 2. Guys, we are finally here. I'm finally ready to do the episode. I wanted to do some more preparing this time because on the last episode that I did, I kind of felt bad. And maybe it was just my own psyche. Maybe I was just psyching myself out, and a little bit nervous that I really didn't talk about really deep into the background of the story of the original Resident Evil. But to be fair, the first game doesn't have a huge, deep background of a story. It's pretty simple and laid out for you, and I covered that in the episode. But like a lot of the story it was like added in later, the background stuff from this game that we're going to cover, but also going forward into the overall story, especially Resident Evil 0. Really dive deeper into the past and everything that was going on within this world. And so we're definitely gonna be talking about story. Resident Evil 2 does have more story than the first game, but I definitely wanted to come in because sometimes I write notes and sometimes I didn't. I didn't feel like I needed to for the first one, and I just kind of winged it and told stories. And I was pretty fresh off of replaying the game. Same here, but I actually took more notes. So hopefully it's a little bit better for me. If you guys enjoyed it, I'm really glad that you did. I'm not saying that I didn't enjoy it, but I don't know. I felt nervous about it, and I never like releasing anything that I'm nervous about. But before we dive into this episode, especially, when I'm talking about releasing stuff, I want to tell you guys about a new podcast that I'm a part of called Rank 'Em All. The Rank 'Em All podcast. We're like a music review podcast where we review and rank all the songs in a band's discography. So what happens is that we take an album, we go down their discography album by album, and we talk about each song, and we each give it a ranking. And at the end, we get our individual average album ranks. All the songs add up to an average, right? So then we take all of our averages and we average that, and that's the master rank. So then we have an entire discography ranked. We've ranked them all. We've ranked all the songs, and then we ranked all of the albums, essentially. So that has started over there at rankemal.rocks. It's also on podcast services. It's all the same places that this podcast is, I'm pretty sure anyway. If it's not, let me know. As well as YouTube. We have a YouTube version, and join us on Facebook because we do a lot of interactions on Facebook, and then we're on Twitter as well at Rank 'Em All. So yeah, guys, I hope you guys go check that out if you're into music podcasts or anything like that. We started with Metallica, so we started with that band's discography, and we're going to be doing more as time goes on. And this is a really cool concept, and we're getting a lot of good feedback from it. So if you guys enjoy that, go check that out. Now that that's out of the way, Resident Evil 2. So this game was kind of what started it for me, for Resident Evil, and I do apologize if I told this story in the last episode, but it bears. But I kind of do need to repeat it because it was the beginning. This game, I got my PlayStation in like October of '98. For good grades or whatever, and this game had just come out prior. I want to say maybe September it came out, around that time. But I know that Metal Gear Solid had just released that year. FF7 had released the year before. So there were already a lot of good games. And here I was, what game did I get with my PS1? Was it FF7, Metal Gear Solid, Resident Evil 2, Tomb Raider, Twisted Metal, Crash Bandicoot, WWF Warzone. That's right. No, I was really big into wrestling at the time, and I had a choice of getting an N64 or a PlayStation, and a lot of my friends had N64s, and that summer, around June or whatever, I played a PlayStation for the first time and made up my mind. That's what I wanted. I wanted a PlayStation, And my buddy was hyping up FF7, which I would eventually get. But of course, back then when you had a PlayStation, you got a demo disc. And on the demo disc was a trailer for Resident Evil 2. And it blew me away. I was like, I have to play this game. This is terrifying. Because at that time, coming from the Super Nintendo era, like I played some N64, played some GoldenEye or Turok or, Star Fox, and then of course like the wrestling games and stuff like that. Like all that stuff that was available. But this was another level of anything, like nothing that I had ever experienced, nothing this dark and horror. That's why I kind of left my light off. It's very dark and shadowy, right? It was very atmospheric, and that is something that the first game lacked in a way. Like yeah, you were in a mansion and you didn't know what was around the corner. You had zombies, you had zombie dogs and giant spiders and tyrants and all this stuff, and killer like vines that would come up and get you, and the occasional broken window, and like underground caves and labs, but it was remarkably well lit. The original PS1 game is remarkably well lit. This game, you're still able to see pretty much everything that you can, but they took the level design to a new level. And that was what drew me in. It was like, this is just crazy. It's chaos and there's zombies and you're running all around doing all of this stuff, like trying to stay alive. And I remember going to my local Hollywood Video with my dad. I want to say it was the weekend after I got my PlayStation, because the first weekend I remember I got it on a Friday. It wasn't a Halloween day. But like my local town always did trick or treating on like the Friday before, because then like up at the Lions Club we had like a weenie roast or something like that. So all the kids could go trick or treating and then walk up to the Lions Club and get some hot dogs and get some beverages or drinks or whatever. And then have like a place to hang out for like an hour or two. That's the fun, like of a small town, like we only had 600 people, where, now in my town, I'd have to drive my kids after we got done trick or treating to somewhere, and do something, and then take them home. Whereas like back then, hell no, you just walked around with your friends and got into trouble and, got candy, all that stuff. Anyway. So it was the next following weekend after I got the PlayStation, we went and rerented the game. And I found this one. I remember holding it in my hand. It was 2 discs. I'm like, holy crap, it's 2 discs. My gosh, this must be a big game. And I brought it home. I put it in. And I was instantly, I had that sense of tension. And that is something that I will say got lost in the Resident Evil series as it went into the more action-oriented 4, 5, and 6. It's still a little bit there in 4. It's a bit different. But there's a level of tension. And I mean, when you go back and play the original game now, you don't really feel that as much if you're a more seasoned gamer. But I was a kid. That game scared the crap out of me. I remember how hard it was just to get to the police station. And that's, of course, that's like the first 2 minutes of the game. And then you get to the police station and you go down that first hall and the liquor drops down and you just don't know what, like trying to kill it, and it's jumping all around and it kills you. And hopefully you saved in the main hall and you're like, now what do I do? Do I run? Like, yeah, dude, you run. You idiot. Anyways, no. I remember like getting to the police station, getting killed a couple times by that liquor, and I had to put it down. Because here I am, it was 98, so I was like 12, so I'm like going into my teens, but this is the first time, like gaming was a different beast back then. I mean, now you have so much, and there's so much, less to the imagination, even. I mean, I know I sound old, but I mean that I had never seen anything like that or experienced anything like that. And it was one of those things that, like, I tried to play it like late at night. It was dark in my room, just like this. You know, that's kind of why I left the light off. You know, sitting there with nothing but the light of the screen on me, trying to work my way through this police station. You know, I don't even know if I made it out of the police station by the time we had to take the game back on Monday or whatever. Man, that game scared the crap out of me. But no, that was what sparked it, because then for Christmas, I think I got like $20 for Christmas. Okay, that's not all I got. I got gifts in like a few games, but like the game, I wanted Resident Evil 2. I want to buy it, but I didn't have enough money for it. Resident Evil 2 was like $40. I had 20, so I bought the original, the director's cut of Resident Evil. And so I took that home and I started playing that. And of course, it's a bit, dated even at that point, just a couple years older. But then I'm like, I'm going to master this game. I'm going to beat this game before I can try and get 2. And I did. And I fell in love with that game. That game's campiness. I fell in love with its character. Just like, Resident Evil 2, the original game on PS1. Man, when I'm talking about top PS1 games, it's up there. Like, it might be in that top 3 echelon of the 3 that I just, 2, Metal Gear Solid, FF7. Everybody has their own opinions about what games those would be for them. But for me, and I love the other Resident Evils. I love the other Final Fantasies. I love Crash, Twisted Metal, Tomb Raider, Siphon Filter. Those are fun. Need for Speeds. The list goes on with other RPGs and platformers, action games that are all great games, and I have a lot of them in my collection. But when I think about games that were that important in the history of my gaming path line, starting off on the Super Nintendo playing Super Mario Brothers and Street Fighter and Zelda, Star Fox and Turtles in Time and that kind of stuff. Never really played RPGs or anything like that on the Super Nintendo that much. I didn't get into that until the PlayStation. But with the PlayStation, it wasn't Metal Gear, or Metal Gear got me into that storytelling aspect of gaming, that I was hooked into the story. Final Fantasy VII got me into RPGs and into the storytelling of that as well. But before those two, what got me hooked on the third person action style games that had like the atmosphere to suck you in, it was Resident Evil 2 without a doubt. So Resident Evil 2 came out in 98, and the gameplay, it's still the tank controls. It's that forklift style. If you go back and try and play it today, if you hadn't played it before, it's gonna feel weird and clunky to you. However, even though it's still the same gameplay style, it feels like a step up. It feels a little bit more responsive. It's hard to explain. I feel like when I play Resident Evil 2, even with the tank controls, it's better to control than the original Resident Evil. And maybe I'm wrong, but that's just kind of how it feels to me. And what they were able to do with this sequel, and you might hear me say this again later, this was their final product, the epitome of taking the formula that worked in the first one and doing it all over again, but doing it different enough, engaging enough, because think about it. The original game, you have the mansion, basically it's like a maze. You can't go in certain doors until you get the certain key or the certain pendant or whatever. You have to work your way around. It is very linear. Like, you're allowed to explore, but you're blocked off. So you can only go in certain rooms or certain doors to find the things that you need to get to go forward. And they did that with the police station in 2. It was the exact same formula. And then in the first game, it's the caves, right? You have to work your way through the cave section to get to the lab. Resident Evil 2, you have the sewer section, which makes its way to the lab. So when you think about it, on the base level, they're the exact same style they did the exact same thing. However, what they were able to do with it was, make it feel fresh even, because it was so, they were able to add in Of course, different weapon types, different enemy types. Because the lickers weren't in the first game. Big. The areas did feel bigger, and the game wasn't necessarily longer, but it was though because they added in the other scenario. So, in the original game, you have Jill and Chris as your playable characters. That's it. You play as those two, and like you have to, with Jill you had Barry around to kind of help you out, and with Chris you had Rebecca. So there was that sense of partnership there, but then there was always someone else that you had to save, so you had two different pathways, but literally they were the same game, just through different sets of eyes. With this one, you have a scenario A and a scenario B for each character. So there's a pathway A, pathway B, because the characters, depending on who you select, they get split up in the very beginning of the game. Now, what's really neat about this is that no matter what you do, when you play the first game, you're going to start, or play the second game, I'm sorry, when you start the game, in the beginning, you start off on pathway A, scenario A every time. It doesn't matter if you pick Claire or Leon, you're on scenario A. After you beat that and complete the game, now you have the option of starting a new game, scenario A with the other character, or using that game save to start scenario B. So now, like, you're going on a different pathway. And what's neat, and I liked how they do this, it was so cool back then because you didn't see a lot of this, where things that you did affected the other, like what you did in scenario A, there's a few things that would affect scenario B. So like there's specifically, there's some windows that you can fix or not fix if you have these wires. And if you fix them in A, they'll be fixed in B, which will actually help you out a little bit. Also, there is a weapons locker where you find a hip pouch to carry more items and a submachine gun. Now, in scenario A, you can take both of them and be like, all right, I got some cool stuff. I'm ready to go. However, it even says in the game, which one do you want? Maybe you should save the other one for Claire or for Leon. Whichever one you do not take will be there in scenario B when that person gets there. So that is really cool. And there's also something at the end of the game with you have to register your handprint. And so the first time around, the person will go through the issues like you need 2 people to unlock this door or whatever. And then you have to make sure that you do it in scenario A. And then so in that way in scenario B, you got to remember to do it that way. Then you now have said technically you have used 2 people to unlock this door. Very interesting, very cool, very meta in a way. Just kind of like what Metal Gear Solid would do by like acknowledging the player or like the memory card. This really isn't on the nose, but it's really cool gameplay integration of utilizing these 2 characters, different paths. Because you didn't have to do that, but it's really neat that they included it. But this game, Resident Evil 2, the final product wasn't the original plan. In fact, the original version of Resident Evil 2 was completely different. And it even had a completely different character. Claire wasn't in it. It was like Eliza Thornberry. No, I'm kidding. No, but like it had another character named like Eliza or something. I can't remember her name. And so it was like Leon and like Eliza. And like even Chief Irons was a different character completely. And the police station was completely different. It looked more modern. Whereas like Resident Evil 2, it looked very like I don't know, Art Deco or just very like over the top. Even more over the top than the mansion. Like, you almost expect the mansion to be over the top, and even like that they went over the top. But this, like the police station's overkill. Like it is so like. How does this really function? Like the hallways are so long, and like here, quick, run this report over there to the STARS office. And the dude's doing a marathon to get over there. And then they're like, all right, cool. Now run back down there and give this to him. You imagine the guy that has to run those papers? Man, he's got to have good stamina to get across that, that police station. It's nuts. It's not practical at all. There are no elevators. They're just like a couple of staircases. It's like 2 staircases or 3 staircases or whatever. And in fact, even in the main hall, you can't get to the second floor from the main hall in the original game. You have to crap, all right, I got to run all the way around the building to get to the staircase in the back so I can run over there, get over there. And then I got to run down that hallway, run through this hallway, run through that hallway, go through the library. Now I'm on the second floor. Okay, so now I got to go to the office all the way across. I got to run all the way over there. Oh gosh, can you imagine when there isn't a zombie apocalypse? Just no wonder this police team doesn't do their investigations the way they should or get anything done, because literally they're just running around the police station with their heads cut off. But no, the original design of the police station was completely different in that original version of the game, and there were aspects that got carried over. Like certain characters are there, certain ones were changed. And the story aspect was completely almost overhauled. But for some reason, it didn't meet the quality standards, I guess, of the director of the game. And he decided to completely scrap it and start over. And that's what they did. Now, you could find that original game somewhere out there on the internet. I don't know where it is. I've never actually played it or seen it. But there's a version of it that is playable. And it's called Resident Evil 1.5. It's the game we never got. And it is fascinating. You can find it on YouTube if you want to, see gameplay of it. I've seen Bakba Soup or whatever play part of it, or it's really neat and interesting to actually see, because people are actually going through to try and complete it, if that's even possible. Man, Resident Evil 2 though, the final product. The guy made me, I'm sorry, the guy made the right decision. In my opinion, because the game that we got was just absolutely phenomenal, if I could say. Like it was a step up in every way from the original game. But the opening of the game, when I first put that game in my PlayStation, it left me in awe and terrified. Like literally standing there as Leon, there's a big explosion. It's like, go to the police station, I'll meet you there. And then it goes into it. It's like you've entered the world of survival horror. I'm like, oh my gosh. And then you're just fire all around you with zombies all around you. And you just have to run. And you're like, oh my God, what do I do? And then, going back to this game after having played the first game, as I said, I got the first game for Christmas. But going back to this game eventually later on, now that I've got my Resident Evil pants on and I know what I'm doing as far as the gameplay goes, whereas on that first weekend I really didn't have that. It was such a treat, I remembered my experience from before, being terrified, and then going to the original game and it wasn't as terrifying, but it was still scary in its own way. But man, it was hammered home so much more that we're not in Kansas anymore. Like this game immediately sets it up as like a step up. And so Leon's one of the characters that you can pick. Leon is a rookie cop on his first day. Why the heck is he coming to town? How did he not hear anything? If things are this bad, this fast, and like are they doing like the Umbrella has to be doing news suppression? There's no other way about it, because how does he not know not to show up? Like, hey, did you hear about that? And see, that doesn't make any sense in like today's society, because this game takes place in 1998, so like it doesn't make any sense, because social media is everywhere. Like even though like the company would be trying everything they could to like keep it hush hush, there are people inside that be doing TikTok videos and going live on Facebook going, well, this is crazy. We would know about it. CNN would be on that crap, and it would be everywhere. But the characterization, okay, so like one thing that Resident Evil 1 had was the bad voice acting, like with D-list actors who couldn't get jobs in like infomercials, for God's sakes. But so the voice acting and characterizations are a little bit better in Resident Evil 2. Not terribly. They're still a bit over the top and kind of action hero-y. Stereotype maybe is the right word for that, but it's a little bit better than 1, but it's not a stretch for. Claire is Chris's sister. Chris has gone missing, And Claire's on her way into town to find him. Of course, Eliza in the original 1.5 game that I talked about earlier, she was a motorcycle chick. So like they kind of kept that same motif with her, but didn't. She's not wearing a full blown like Japanese style full body suit motorcycle outfit. Then there's other characters. You have Ada Wong. She's like this mysterious woman looking for her boyfriend, John. And, Leon comes across her. She, just like in the original game, how you have like an extra person, Rebecca or Barry, Ada is there for Leon. He comes across her and they kind of interact a little bit and she's in and out. And, Ada is actually a direct callback to the first game too. She is mentioned by name in the letter that you find. And John works there, and her name is like a password or something. But another character, Sherry Birkin, this little girl, copy paste what I just said almost. She's not a spy, but like she is Claire's like other character part. She's a little girl wandering on a PlayStation, ducking monsters and zombies and all that stuff. She's present in the story, and also both Ada and Sherry have playable sections. So, unlike, I think you might have did that as Rebecca in the first game. Yeah, I think you did. Like you had to go get like serum or whatever. But in this game, there are sections where you take over as Ada and as Sherry. And I want to say that sections are pretty much the same as it's kind of like a fetch quest or something, but that's pretty much it. And I think Ada gets, I can't remember if Sherry gets another one too. Maybe there's another section in the sewers. But then Chief Irons is he's in this one, and different from the 1.5 characterization. He's a complete psychopath. But he's been bought off, and he's in cahoots with Umbrella. And this is like, he is so melodramatic in this game. He's over the top. He's like, I think I've seen the little girl wandering around. I wonder if she's still alive. It is so ridiculous and over the top. But like he hunts down and like kills the mayor's daughter. Like she's like a really young, attractive woman because Chief Irons is a hunter and he's obsessed with taxidermy and he's gonna mount and stuff her. It's pretty uncomfortable. William Birkin. If there's a lead enemy of the game, it's pretty much him. He's the lead scientist in Umbrella's Raccoon Lab, and he developed the G virus, new virus, kind of variant of like I'm not sure if it's based off the T virus or if it's a variant, but it's a new one. And he comes across as very Bond villainy in the original game. He's like, "You've come for my precious G virus. You will not get it." So Umbrella, of course, like sends people to go get the virus and guns him down, and he injects himself, and he becomes a big giant monster. The G virus is different from the T virus because it's like it's like an evolving virus, like it mutates, and it almost seems like it mutates the more damage that you do to him, like he changes. So it's like it makes the perfect bioweapon, because if you remember, that's exactly what Umbrella's doing here with these viruses. They're making bioweapons. That's my headcanon for why zombies can take more than like 1 or 2 headshots sometimes, or 7. Sometimes you don't get a good enough shot, but like that's why, because they're not just a regular zombie with a knife to the head. They're dead. It's like they are a weapon, and they just keep going. And the G virus, after William injects himself, like you have a couple different boss fights with him, where then each time you face him, he's in a different form. So like each time you beat him and cause more damage, then he mutates a little bit more. And the more that he mutates, the more that he loses himself, right? Annette is his wife, Annette Birkin, and workaholic, and supports her husband to the end, even to a fault. And will stop at nothing to bring down the people trying to stop them or get in the way. But then you have a couple of other side characters that are here. Kendo, the gun shop owner. In the very beginning of the game, he's the gun shop owner. Freeze! What are you doing here? You even find a note. I can't remember if it's in this game or whatever. It's a note from Barry's good friends with Kendo or whatever. Or apparently the whole STARS team is as well. And then Marvin, he's a fellow officer. He's the officer that Leon finds bitten. And then he kind of gives him a brief summary of what happened with Umbrella, and that the STARS team had kind of broke this case, that nobody believed them. But then, of course, when you find him a little bit later, he actually turns. So that's kind of really neat, because as far as I'm aware, that is like one of the first instances in this series of, because in the first Resident Evil, you find that diary that you read, where you follow this guy through him getting infected and him slowly losing his mind. But in this, you find Marvin, who's injured, and then when you come across him, you see him turn. Like he comes after you. So that's the first time that you actually get to see that. Another character in the story is Ben. He's a journalist who's got the scoop on Umbrella. He's locked up by Chief Irons. He's going to break the whole case. However, it also really isn't. I don't think he has any hard evidence of anything. So the story for this for the original game, I've already covered some of the stuff there, but after the events of the original game at the Spencer Mansion, the surviving STARS members bring their case that they found that Umbrella was behind the whole thing. Well, Umbrella, and then they were also betrayed by Wesker. They bring it to Chief Irons, but Umbrella already has Chief Irons in the pocket. Pretty much the whole town is in Umbrella's pocket. And then they're aware of what they're doing, or at least to an extent. They're bought off. They don't, do everything to keep everything off their back. They're really rooted into the local government. And this eventually, since the STARS members have brought this forward, it makes them marked and targeted by the company. So Chris leaves town. That's why Claire's looking for him, right? So he leaves town and actually heads over to Europe, where Umbrella's headquarters is, and he's doing some investigating over there. And Jill stays behind to do some investigating still here, at home in Raccoon City. Maybe she stays a little too long. That may be a discussion for another episode, right? Meanwhile, Umbrella is on damage control from what happened at the mansion. The mansion's destroyed, so there's no real hard proof. And then Birkin. From what I understand, because when I was making my notes, I couldn't remember if they had ordered him to stop, or I think this is what was really going down. He decided to sell it. And sell it to the highest bidder, and they found out. So here's Umbrella funding this entire project, and Birkin sells them out by trying to sell it for a profit to a competitor. And Umbrella decides to relieve him of his duties and pull all funding and send a strike team in to get the G-Virus samples. They also have orders to bring in William Birkin alive. It doesn't really go down like that. He pulls a gun, and one of the Umbrella operatives opens fire and kills him, or fatally wounds him. He's hit multiple times, and they are told, now that he's dead, just bring in the sample. Before he actually dies, though, Birkin takes one of the samples that they didn't take and injects it into himself. And he pretty much stops those operatives from leaving the city. And the G-Virus, see, and this is where it's a bit confusing. When they stole, like, did they have samples of the T-Virus too, is what I want to know. Because if the G-Virus was in everybody, because not all the zombies are like metamorphing, and when you put damage on them, it's just William Birkin and like maybe these other couple of G creatures that you find that can, like, because what they can do is that they can reproduce by like putting embryos inside other living things, right? That's something that the G infected monsters can do. But the zombies can't do that. So I wonder if some of that was in there as well because they were using that as a basis, maybe. But after like William Birkin's like eating vials of, and then of course this stuff's getting everywhere, and then rats are pretty much the direct spread of the virus in the city within days, maybe even a week. I'm not even sure when. It seems like it's when like within days that the entire city falls, and it's fast. So like Leon and Claire ride into town together unknowingly. They meet up and they go to the police station and make their way individually through the police station. Of course, Leon finds Ada. Claire finds Sherry. So that's when the story kind of deviates a little bit, because then you find out that Chris and the other STARS members are not in town, right? But then, like, you know, Ada's not who she said. She isn't who she says she is. She's like an agent or whatever, looking for the G virus. And Sherry is basically parentless at this point. She's been running around. Oh, if you hear that kid crying, hey, this is podcasting. His dad laughed, guys. He's okay. But you have run-ins with William Birkin as both, like in both terms. But also Umbrella sending in other things. You know, they sent in the strike team, and it failed. So then they send in the Tyrant. And of course, we see the Tyrant in the original Resident Evil. And in this game, it is a more weaponized version of that, wearing a trench coat. His name's Mr. X. And what's interesting is that this is the first time we don't really get to know or see that in the original game. It's in the remake that we see it. And I am going to talk about the remake and the some similarities and differences later on. But basically, they are controlling him, you know, remotely. Like, he is hunting down survivors and trying to find samples of the G virus. And of course, he's hunting Sherry. So at first you're thinking, oh crap, he's hunting Sherry because it's William Birkin's daughter, survivor, all this stuff, killer. She's wearing a pendant, and in the pendant is a sample of the G virus she didn't even know was there. So of course you end up, Leon ends up getting shot by Annette Birkin. You find out that Ada, see, there's like a connection thing with Leon and Ada, where like Leon kind of like falls in love with her, or it's like an implied romance where she's kind of falling in love with him. But of course, she doesn't work. She doesn't work for Umbrella either. She's a mercenary, and of course we find out later that she's in direct she works for the same people that Wesker were working for, whatever, you know, like that's tied in later. I remember that in like Resident Evil 4. But and then of course you assume that she dies, Ada, in the second game, but she doesn't. And then of course again, same game, different face, or different look. You know, the self-destruct sequence has been activated, so that you both have to escape from the lab, and you're on a train in like that. See, like when you beat the game in scenario A and you get on the train, like, oh, we won. On scenario B, you have the boss fight with Mr. X, and then you get on the train. But then it's like there's one more fight, and it's like basically the unstoppable G William Birkin, the big giant eyeball, and just will not die, big blob at this point. And then like they leave and get out of the tunnel as the self-destruct sequence goes off. The whole lab's destroyed. And it's like bright and sunny, and it's daylight. And then the story's not over because Claire hasn't found her brother. But no, like it was take the original Resident Evil and pump up the action a little bit. Like it felt more like an action movie, especially for the time anyway. But it was a phenomenal ride because it had the same puzzle solving techniques and all that stuff. But then a few years ago, we got the remake of Resident Evil 1 on the GameCube. And, I talked about that in that episode where it was like they made a perfect remake of that game. They kept the overall like forklift style of controls, but everything else, even that style of gameplay was just smoother and everything. The environment, man. So what they did with the remake of 2, of course, this is coming off the heels of them doing Resident Evil 7, right? So Resident Evil 7 kind of refreshed the Resident Evil series. As I said, you had the first 4 games, and then of course you had the remake, and 0 was another one, like an additive to that style. But then you had 4, 5, and 6 that were a different over-the-shoulder action style game, and then 7 was a first-person, kind of like a semi-horror title with hiding from family members and crazy family members in a house. They're kind of tracking you and following you, and it's a lot. They'll bring in a lot of tension. So Resident Evil 2 brought in the over the shoulder perspective, maybe from from the 4, 5, and 6, but they made it more modern, and they were able to meld in aspects of the original gameplay from the original 2. Like your item slots and your item box is still there, but then bring that in, but then it made it feel very modern, and it was just so. I for a long time said the original Resident Evil remake is the best remake of all time, and that was the case until this game came out. Resident Evil 2 remake, bar none, is the best remake I've ever played, because on top of just the gameplay aspect, they completely redesigned the police station, but it still feels like the police station. There's enough aspects there from the original layout that it gives you that sense of nostalgia, and also tension, big, massive amount of tension going down these. As I said, like the original game, the original Resident Evil 2 was a set piece. They do that in spades in the remake by making the certain hallways and just completely pitch black dark, where the only way that you can see is that with their flashlight. So when you are trying to go down and see, all you can see is where you're kind of pointing and trying to look around at. It's very dark. And then, of course, there's other areas a little bit more well lit. But like even the main hall, now you can get up to the second floor from the first floor and go around there and do that kind of stuff. But then they also said in the remake that, and I don't remember this at all in the original game. So if it is there, I do apologize. But this police station was converted from a museum, which it makes completely sense why this is all like just not really plausible that like you'd have a setup like this. But now it makes sense that this was a museum, it had artwork, which is why it was full of this weird artwork, but so on top of that, they've changed the layout a little bit. They've changed whereabouts and the ins and outs of where you go and all that kind of stuff. But some of the stuff is right there, and it's pretty similar. Like changing the way you get to the garage of the police station, but that garage is still there, And then when you go to that garage and come back, Mr. X is there. So Mr. X was only originally in scenario 2, and he seemed to just show up and follow you, but he wasn't really following you. It was scripted. So when you got to certain points in the game, he would bust through the wall or come around the corner at you, and then you had to try and either kill him or run away, and he was always very slow and sluggish, and he just always trying to hit you and shit. But in this game, they brought in some of that family member stalking type thing from 7, where when you go back into the main police station, because I like the way that they did it, because they purposely made it to where there's only a few things that you really had to do left in the police station at this time. And both of these things were on separate sides of the building. So you had to use this key to get this one thing for the library, and then you had another room that was on the other side of the building that was like around like the interrogation room or whatever to get down and get the STARS badge or whatever. But literally, after you encounter Mr. X in the main scenario, now he follows you room to room, and there's only a few rooms that he doesn't go into. And you hear him thumping around. If you have headphones on and you have like a really good like surround sound, that is tension. That is tension. I know some people didn't like it. I absolutely loved it. It was awesome. And then if you're making a lot of noise or you have to shoot zombies or lickers, something like that, it can lure him to your location. And then there's also times where he just like he magically appears, like where it's scripted for him to do so. And I'm not sure if he can do that all the time. If he's on one side of the building and you start firing, then the game will be like, oh, you're over there, so let's like copy paste him over here. Not copy, cut. No, man, heck, we don't need more of them. I've seen mods, trust me, where every enemy is Mr. X. But I thought that was a really inventive way to do that. And then, of course, you can come back to the police station way later on for one or two things, and then he's not there anymore. But the police station being nostalgic enough, what they had to do for the remake was get your nostalgia button going and then lead you on a journey. And that's exactly what they did, because then the sewer is completely different. 100%. Is there still a giant alligator? Yes, but it's a completely different experience. You know, is there an Ada playable section? Yes, but it's a completely different experience. You know, and then the lab, it's really neat how the lab does this. The lab does tickle your nostalgia button just a little bit because you're in this lab, but it's a completely redesigned lab, and it's completely redesigned. Not just in level design, but in story and how you go through it, and do everything there. So it's completely different, in which I think was perfect. It was absolutely perfect, and that bled over into the remake of RE3, which I won't talk about today. I'll save that for another video. But the other section I want to talk about is when you play as Claire. You know, because you don't go down into the sewers the same way. So as Claire, Sherry gets taken by Chief Irons. So then you have the Sherry playable section in this orphanage, and you are Sherry trying to avoid Chief Irons. So you're hiding behind stuff. You can't really attack him or do much, and you're trying to escape from him. So again, tension. But that's when you find out, when you read files later, they were experimenting on these orphans, Umbrella, and Chief Irons knew, and they had a pathway to the lab from the orphanage, and they were infecting these kids with the G virus. God, it's like the game doesn't hammer you over the head with it, but if you bother to read it, it's there. And it's like, that is heavy shit. So in Claire's story with Sherry, goes a little bit of a different direction, where she does get in the original game, I didn't mention this, she gets infected, and one of the things you have to do as Claire in the lab in both versions is try to synthesize like a cure, right? And then you have to do that, because she gets William infects her, like I said, all the G virus infected monsters can plant embryos and then make monsters, and they bust out of your chest like the damn aliens, right? Like the little chest bursters. But it's really susceptible for when the original person who's infected, if the other person has very similar DNA. So that's why she was infected, and it just didn't kill her and bust through her really fast. Through other people, it does. Like they do, like that's called like a rejection or whatever. Chief Irons, that happens in Chief Irons, in like in the remake. I think in the first game he's just cut in half and whatever, but in the remake he's infected and it kills him. So in the remake, you cure Sherry and then you leave. So they changed the scenarios. So in remake, you do have scenario A and scenario B, just like last time. However, that was one of the things about this game that I thought was kind of the least like the original. Like it almost seemed too similar. B seemed too similar to A, and the things that you had to do. But they made the most differences between Leon's path and Claire's path. So whereas those paths are already built in to be different in the original game, and then you had the scenarios be even more different. In this game, the emphasis is on the paths being different, and the scenarios are just also like the little extra fight here, or like a little bit different thing over here. And I believe, I can't remember if this happens in both Claire's scenario A and B, but like Mr. X is following her after the orphanage, and Mr. X gets killed by William Birkin. And then you don't see him again pretty much ever. Whereas Leon, it's a bit different. So there's like, so also think about that. There are two Mr. X's here. One's chasing Claire or probably more Sherry, and then one chasing Leon. So there's that. But then of course you also have that same instance of the extra fight at the end with the big blob, William Birkin. Whereas, like I think the two different stories merge, where you're on this big elevator with Claire, and you're fighting William Birkin, and then Leon, you're on another different kind of elevator, kind of like more of a platform elevator, and you're fighting Mr. X. So like they do a lot to make them different. As I said, Resident Evil 2 Remake, it's taken the spot from the original game for me. I played, when this game came out, I couldn't quit playing it for like a month. And even then, I keep coming back to it because it's so good. You know, my opinion on the third game's remake is not necessarily in the same light. And I will be talking about that in a future episode. I'm not sure if that's going to be the next episode. It will be the one coming up. It will be the next deep dive that I do will be Resident Evil 3. And it will probably be a lot shorter because it's a lot shorter of a game. But before we, before like we dive into that, I will say I don't dislike it. I do like it, just not anywhere near as much as the original 2 and the remake of 2. Both are phenomenal games, and you cannot go wrong. Resident Evil 2 Remake made me fall in love again with the whole Resident Evil, because I skipped out on 7, guys. 6 turned me off so bad. I haven't even finished 6. Turned me off so bad that when 7 came out, I'm like, yeah, nope, not playing it. So it wasn't until I played 2, very similar to my story. Even though I didn't rent 2 this time, I went back and I played 7, and I like it. I like it a lot. I'm looking forward to Village. I'm not sure if it's a day one buy for me, but simply because games are so expensive now. If I do play it, it'll be on the PS5, which I didn't want to start at the beginning of the episode and say it. I got one. Finally got one. I don't have it yet in my possession, but I'll tell the story about how I got one on the next episode of the Game Addicts podcast. This episode has been the deep dive in Resident Evil 2. There's probably more to talk about. I mean, I didn't really touch on Hunk. There's a whole side story, and that's another thing. I want to wrap up the episode, but so there's like side games. There's like a side game thing where you it's like a survivor thing. But you got to make your way through. It's like a time thing where you're playing with Hunk. It's the surviving member of the Umbrella thing. And then if you beat that, then you get Tofu, right? Oh crap, that's not okay. So episode's not over yet. I just remembered. I would have hated myself if I didn't talk about this. the remake of Resident Evil 2 went so far into updating some of these characters. Marvin is awesome in the remake. Still injured, still turns into a zombie, but but the other guy, Kendo, the gun shop owner. You don't, in the original game, you start off, you go through the gun shop immediately. In this game, in the remake, it's not until you leave the police station that you run across the street and you have to cut through his gun shop. And his daughter's infected. He already lost his wife to this shit, and she's infected. And my gosh. So the storyline aspect of Resident Evil 2, it never hits that deep emotional level that like a game like The Last of Us hits, like the first game of that, or like just like I look back on the first Last of Us and I think about the scene with Sam and Henry. Sam gets infected. It's that whole thing plays out like that, right? That is the closest. Kendo and his daughter is the closest that this game gets, and it still hits. As a parent, that does hit. But no, they did a just a bang up job bringing the story, the gameplay, the environment, everything up to the next level. And if you can find this game in any form, it's on the PS4, it's on Xbox One, it's on PC. You can get it. You can find it. It's not that expensive now. It's been out for a couple years. You can get it on cheap. I highly recommend it. But guys, I think that's going to do it. I still might have missed a few things. I still might have skimmed over stuff. But everything was improved. That's one thing about like between the original game and even Birkin's less Bond villainy, And this game, you really only see him once. Like you see him as the monster, but you see him in that that file footage that you find, and he's just so well more represented. It's way more real. But guys, I am legitimately going to end the episode now. Thank you guys so much for checking it out. I hope you enjoyed this one. I'll be talking about Resident Evil 3 on the next deep dive. I'm not sure if it's going to be next. I might do my my next episode like a more general news, or maybe I'll get one of my buddies on and we'll talk some games. But if you followed me along this far in this episode, please go check out the other episode for Resident Evil and some of the other deep dives that I've done as well. I think I've done like The Last of Us. We've done Final Fantasy 7, 8, 9. And there's going to be more down the pipeline too. I have a whole list of games I would like to do deep dives on. And also check out all the other episodes and any other podcasts. Like I said, rank them all, and Journey into Comics and Podcastrophe. All those links are on the website. Go check that out. Check out the Endgame Boss program. I do the show over there at the World Gaming Trade Show with my buddy over there, good old Jeremy Evans over there, hanging out and talking about some cool ideas about what to do with some old games that have been around for a long time. In the meantime, guys, I have been Brando, and this has been the Game Addicts Podcast, and I'll see you guys next time. Game on.